Welcome to 20 Minutes to Business Insights, a complimentary resource webinar series from AKA Coach & Company. I'm Annie Kirschenman, and I'll be your host for our topic today, the dimensions of leadership. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video now so that you can focus on our slides. If you have questions about today's material, there will be a slide at the end of the presentation with our contact information. So please feel free to reach out if you have a question or a comment. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Annie Kirschenman. I'm a board-certified coach with the specialty designation Executive, Corporate, Business, and Leadership. I'm also a business person, have been for more than 20 years now. However, the world of business is not where I started. I come from a background in the arts, and creativity as well as innovation are a major part of my work today as a coach and facilitator. I'm also a former executive. I stepped down from my CEO role in 2005. Additionally, I'm an authorized partner for Everything Disc, a Wiley brand, and have been working with the disc since the 1990s. And I just love sharing what I've learned, what works, what's interesting for me as well as others. Ergo, this webinar series. So if you're joining us live, thanks again for being here. If you're watching a recording of this webinar, thanks for taking time to view it. Okay, to our topic for today, the dimensions of leadership. This is our resource for the information we'll be covering today, The 8 Dimensions of Leadership by Sugarman, Scullard, and Wilhelm. Now, this book is the result of a great deal of research, and there's an overview of that research in the appendix. There's also a research report available, and for those who may be interested in taking a deeper dive, we'll include a link for it post-webinar, and that research report is complimentary. So what are these 8 dimensions? We could also refer to these as qualities of leadership, or leadership priorities, or approaches to leadership, and there you see them. Pioneering, energizing, affirming, inclusive, humble, deliberate, resolute, and commanding. So a few things to bear in mind as we're going through the information today. First of all, there is no right or wrong approach to leadership. As you'll see, each dimension or quality has its strengths, and it also has its drawbacks. In fact, the authors suggest that as leaders, we need to be able to access each of these different dimensions. And be that as it may, all of us will have our own preferences in terms of style or leadership priorities, certain qualities or approaches that come naturally to us and others that don't. The DISC is embedded in this model. And for those of you who are not familiar with the DISC, it is a style, preference, inventory, and assessment. We're going to watch a short video introduction now to this leadership model, which will also explain the DISC. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, it will be an introduction to DISC. For those of you who are familiar, think of it as an opportunity to perhaps refresh. Also, as you're viewing the video, please reflect upon why each skill might be an important one for leadership. And also, see which of the dimensions seem like they might be your style preferences and which ones are not.
I'd like to introduce you to a simple model called DISC. Let's discover how DISC can improve your effectiveness as a leader. DISC describes 4 basic styles: D, I, S, and C, that can help you understand how you and others approach the work of leaders. For instance, leaders with a D, or dominant style, tend to be commanding, pioneering, and resolute. They're direct and not afraid to be forceful. Leaders with this style push to keep things moving, and they often create an environment with a strong focus on speed and results. On the other hand, leaders with the I, or influence style, tend to be energizing, pioneering, and affirming. You can recognize these leaders by their outgoing nature and optimistic attitude. They enjoy the spotlight, and they like to create a fun, colorful environment with a lively sense of team spirit. Or consider people with the S, or steadiness leadership style, who tend to be inclusive, humble, and affirming. These leaders have a gentle and sincere manner, and they're often seen as good listeners. They help create a warm environment where harmony and collaboration are valued. And finally, leaders with a C, or conscientiousness style, are often deliberate, humble, and resolute. They are strongly analytical and place a high value on quality and accuracy. These leaders focus on creating an orderly, business-like environment where people make decisions based on logic rather than emotions. These 4 basic DISC styles use different combinations of the 8 leadership priorities around the Everything DISC leadership map. These priorities describe the primary areas where leaders focus their energy. Let's take a look at some leaders who can show us these priorities in action. First, let's watch Joel, a leader with the I style, who puts a high priority on energizing others.
The leader creates a positive vibe where people are open. They're constantly communicating, collaborating, and sharing.
Next, let's take a look at Kathleen, a humble leader who falls between the S and C styles.
I tend to be much more low-key than most leaders I know. I realize that if I have my ego in check, it's easier to maintain perspective and be fair.
And here's Jen, a leader who likes being pioneering. She combines the D and I styles.
I'm really an entrepreneur at heart. What gets me excited is when you can take people and ideas and resources and bring them together and make something extraordinary happen.
The next leader, Peter, is quite deliberate, which is typical of his C style.
As a leader, I like to approach problems systematically. Obviously, this ensures that issues get dealt with logically, but it also creates a framework that everyone can follow.
Now, let's watch Christiana, a leader who puts a high value on affirming others.
I find reasons to tell people what a good job they've done. It's actually one of my favorite parts of being a leader. If people know that they're appreciated, they're going to identify with the team and the work we're doing that much more.
Across the circle from Christiana is Anne, a resolute leader who balances the D and C styles.
I've been told that I'm strong-willed. If we set a goal, my job as the leader is to make sure that it happens. Yeah, I expect obstacles. That's just a part of life if you want to achieve anything meaningful.
Eric, our next leader, puts a high priority on being inclusive.
Really, if I succeed as a leader, it's only because of the people I have on my team. I absolutely rely on their input every day.
Finally, let's take a look at Gabe, a commanding leader with a D style.
If I tell the team we're going to make something happen, we're going to make it happen. And if I think things aren't going in the right direction or they aren't going quickly enough, we're going to have a conversation about that.
So, as you can see, there are many different types of leaders. Because they all have different strengths based on their priorities, all of the styles are valuable. And by learning about your own DISC style, you can start to understand how your natural tendencies and priorities affect the way you lead.
Okay, so I hope the video not only helps to explain the model, but also helps to make it clear that all the different leadership dimensions are important to effective leadership. Part of what we're talking about here is developing the ability to apply the appropriate leadership skill at the right time and in the right situation. As an example, sometimes leadership requires us to drive and make quick decisions. Other times, it's much more important to slow down and consider solutions systematically. An effective leader is able to apply the needed skill at the needed time. And as I've mentioned, each of us will also have style preferences in leadership. So let's take a look at a series of slides that identify the hallmarks of each leadership quality. And as I review them for you, take the opportunity to further identify which one or ones sound like you and which ones definitely do not sound like you. Okay, first up, our pioneering leaders. They are adventurous, dynamic, charismatic, optimistic, persuasive, action-oriented, and driven. At their best, these are bold, passionate leaders who inspire others to take chances on new directions. At their worst, these are impulsive, overconfident leaders who use their charm to gain support for wild ideas. Next, our energizing leaders. They're spontaneous, outgoing, encouraging, enthusiastic, persuasive. They're idea generators, and they are definitely big picture people. At their best, these are upbeat, eager leaders who are willing to take chances on colorful new ideas. At their worst, these are scattered, erratic leaders who see little need for consistency. Our affirming leaders are friendly, approachable, positive. They love to acknowledge others, as we saw in the video. They're easygoing. They tend to have an open door policy, and they're very good at creating calm environments. At their best, these are kind and supportive leaders who work to create a respectful and peaceful environment. At their worst, these are indirect, conflict-averse leaders who fail to hold others accountable. The inclusive leader is diplomatic, accepting, patient, very good at creating stable environments, dependable, methodical, and accommodating. At their best, these are sincere and accommodating leaders who collaborate with others to make decisions where everyone wins. At their worst, these are passive, overly trusting leaders who let others take advantage of their supportive and patient nature. The humble leader is soft-spoken, modest, precise, methodical, consistent, fair-minded, and practical. At their best, these are modest and fair-minded leaders who provide reliable outcomes through steadiness and consistency. At their worst, these are rigid, overly cautious leaders who are afraid to move beyond the status quo. And as an FYI, I've written a blog on the somewhat underrated quality of humility in leadership. We'll be including a link for that in our follow-up message if you haven't had a chance to look at it. Okay, next, our deliberate leaders. They are systematic, cautious, analytical, accurate. They have high standards. They prefer a moderate pace. And boy, do they like to get things right the first time. At their best, these are conscientious, disciplined leaders who provide high-quality outcomes through careful analysis and planning. At their worst, these are risk-averse, perfectionistic leaders who pay little attention to the human element. Our resolute leaders are challenging, determined, rational. They have high standards. They can be blunt. They're efficient and quality-oriented. At their best, these are questioning and independent leaders who aren't afraid to challenge the status quo to get better results. At their worst, these are cynical and insensitive leaders who seem intent on putting a negative spin on everything. And finally, our commanding leaders. They're competitive, driven, assertive, take charge, goal-oriented. They can be very demanding, and they are very focused on results. At their best, these are powerful and decisive leaders who enlist others to work quickly toward ambitious goals. At their worst, these are forceful, egotistical leaders who push others at the expense of morale. Okay, that was a quick trip through the different dimensions or priorities. So now a few thoughts on how leaders can use this information to be more effective. First of all, learning about your own style preferences or priorities, or identifying those, can help you to leverage the skills that come naturally to you as a leader. This information can also help you discover areas where you are less effective, and this in turn helps you to begin to practice new skills, which in turn helps you to become better at applying the right skill at the right time, and this, of course, makes you a more effective leader. A couple more points about the resource, the Dimensions of Leadership. If you're curious about your own leadership preferences and also interested in acquiring the book, there's a personal leadership map option available with that book. Again, we'll be sending you more information about that post-webinar. And here you can see a sample of this simple one-page snapshot, which shows where your preferences or priorities land in the pie of the model, as well as some descriptive information about your preferences. This resource is designed to help you discover your strengths as a leader and suggest practices for improvement in areas that are not your forte. Therefore, the map invites you to focus on specific areas of the book that are most relevant to you. And as such, it's not necessarily designed to be read cover to cover. Now, that being said, it's a very interesting read cover to cover, and I do recommend that you take a look at the whole book. It has a lot of very useful information for anyone with any style preference in any leadership position. Okay, so what's next? As I've been mentioning, you're going to receive a follow-up message from us with information on how you can get the complimentary resource report, the book, and your own personalized leadership map, as well as the opportunity for a one-to-one debrief on your leadership map with me, if you wish. There'll be a link for the recording of the webinar if you want to view it again or share it with a friend or colleague. We'll also include information on how you can register for the next free 20 Minutes to Business Insights, which will be September 27th at 12 noon Central. This is our last Business Insights for 2017, so I hope you can join me when we'll be discussing the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. This is based on the perennially best-selling 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Pat Lencioni. And we'll be exploring, well, what are the 5 competencies that excellent teams need to develop? There it is, what dysfunctions do we want to fix on our teams? Why are they important? And how can you start to practice them on your team? Okay, if you have questions or comments, here is our contact information. This has been 20 Minutes to Business Insights, a complimentary resource webinar series from AKA Coach & Company. Thank you for joining us live or viewing the recording of this webinar. Please be in touch with me, Annie Kirschenman, if you have questions or comments. And I hope to see you at the next webinar on September 27th, when we'll be exploring the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.